Hi, I'm Rachel, and once again I've stayed off of BookTube for a week, and I don't really know what's going on with me. I think it's a mix of lethargy and general laziness, and maybe I'm having a little bit of imposter syndrome about what I'm doing here, but one of the pros, maybe, of being a small fry booktuber is that since my audience isn't that big, why don't I just go in it for myself and do what I want to do? And this is a video I've had on my mind for a while, or at least it ties into things from months ago, because back in July I went to the huge San Diego Comic-Con for comics, science fiction, fantasy, and movies and books and other media. And while I was there, I picked up a whole variety of reading materials, mostly for free, and I justified doing all of this by saying that I'll talk about them on BookTube, and I've slowly been doing that. So the other day, I read through these three pamphlets, so really they are like a handful of the first few chapters of these three books. One of them, I believe, was actually out in July already. The other one came out in November. The third one still isn't out yet, although it's just luck on my case, because it was supposed to come out in January, but I think the publishing date got moved back to February. So yes, I read all of these a couple of days ago, and I thought I'd give my thoughts. So this is the first sampler, is I guess the technical correct term for this, that I read. This is a YA science fiction, I guess, technically, property, Archenemies by Marissa Meyer. It is the second book in her new trilogy. And this is one of those things that I picked up in the heat of Comic-Con, where I just was in a grabby mood, like, oh, free samplers, free samplers! Because even as I picked it up, I knew that I wasn't a huge fan of Marissa Meyer's first series, The Lunar Chronicles. And I had more affinity for those than I would for this, because the Lunar Chronicles are based on fairy tales, and I did enjoy parts of them, but this new trilogy is based on superhero franchises, and that's not really my bag. So I had even less to be invested in with this story, and much less that I just generally don't like the types of stories that she tells, going by the Lunar Chronicles and now going by this one. I mean, technically it's the second book in a trilogy, so maybe I would feel differently if it were the first. Although, you know, to her credit, I suppose, she does have a bit of a refresher in these first few chapters, so that somebody might be able to jump in immediately without reading the first book. But in general, I just feel like the world building is pretty facile and just way too black and white, good and evil for me. We met a bunch of characters who all had superpowers, and most of them were sort of fighting for good and fighting against like a group of burglars, most of whom were human, and they had one anarchist, I guess, on their team. And then the good guys are called renegades, and the only thing that really stuck out to me is that one of the renegades is a secret anarchist. But otherwise, there's just not much to these characters, and this plot line doesn't interest me at all, and it's just a confirmation of the fact that I probably shouldn't have picked this up to begin with, and now I'll be putting it aside. This next one I also didn't have high hopes for. This is Providence by Caroline Kepnes. And on first glance, it didn't even have much to do with science fiction or fantasy, although I've since spoiled myself on the Goodreads synopsis, which gives a lot of the story away, a lot more than this sampler does. But it seems like there will be a science fictional element that'll come later on. And I have to admit, I was sort of swept into this. This is the story of, well, we start with a chapter by the teenager John, who's a bit of an outcast in school, and he gets abducted at the end of the chapter, and then we move on to his one and only friend, Chloe, and Chloe dealing with the aftermath of it, of the fact that her friend is missing and has been, you know, as the story goes along, is missing for longer and longer, and what she does to sort of cope with the fact that people are forgetting him, but she wants to remember him, and then there's also other teen issues going on at the same time. And it's a very topical look at all of this emotion, but it just sweeps me away. I mean, it reminds me of my obsession with Lifetime movies. It's just, in the moment, it's just very compelling. Now that it's been a couple of days, I'm not as invested in continuing with the story, but I think if I did have the full book at the time, I would have finished it, and I probably would have liked it for what it is. And finally, this is probably the only one that I'm justified to have picked up. This is The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders. It is an adult science fiction book. It's a genre that I definitely want to pay more attention to. And you see here, this is a pre-cover reveal, but now there's a cover for the book. And it was supposed to come out in January, but now it's coming out in February, and I've been hearing lots of talk about it on the interwebs, and I found it intriguing. This is the story of Sophie, who lives on a far-off planet with other humans, but the humans who have colonized this planet can only do so in 2 cities because the planet doesn't move. And so most of the planet is either like swathed in like horrible heat, like that people can't survive, or horrible darkness and cold that people also can't survive. So there are only 2 cities on the edges where people can survive. And Sophie is part of a city that seems to be a bit of a dictatorship. She's a revolutionary herself and meets secretly at her college with other revolutionaries. And then she takes the fall for her roommate who stole some goods, and she's pushed out into the cold side of the planet where she's expected to die, but she doesn't. She's able, with the help of some alien creatures, to sneak back into the city. And that's basically where this pamphlet sampler has left us. It took me a little bit to get into this, though. I think it's because maybe it wasn't hand-holdy enough. It kind of started as a contemporary romp into her feelings about her roommate, and you know, so I feel like I shouldn't be expecting as much hand-holding as I'm demanding, though. But I mean, I see myself as a person who's more interested in character than plot, but I think in this case it took until the plot warmed up, or at least we got some world-building aspects for me to be more curious about this, because maybe the characters weren't well developed enough in the beginning. Hopefully they will be as the story goes along. I don't know. One thing that certainly sticks out to me in this, through the world building, is just a visual image of the city, which is guarded by these 2 mountains named for a mother and a father, and it basically keeps the massive sun and the massive cold and darkness at bay. So I thought that was just a very striking image. And I'm not sure if it's a mix of things. Maybe it's like somewhat personal interest, but also the fact that I know that Charlie Jane Anders is sort of a darling of adult science fiction, and I want to get more invested in adult science fiction. So both of those sort of compel me to want to continue with this. But I don't think I will. I don't think I'm going to actually continue with any of these 3 books. And that mostly has to do with my own reading goals throughout the year. I posted recently about the National Jewish Book Awards and a book list that I comprised out of the winners and finalists for that I want to read throughout the year. I'm also really hoping to do some unofficial version of Read Your Own Damn Books. Or actually, I think it was Sean the Book Maniac. I heard this on his channel, that he was taking part in a more official read-along called Read Your Shelves, which is another great pun for what I want to do, which is to actually tackle the books I already own. But I'm also hoping to take part in more BookTube-related reading. Read-alongs and the sort, although those still push me to buying new books or going to the library, so I don't know where the line is here. But anyway, I'm segueing into the fact that just tonight I was going through some BookTube videos, and I heard about a new BookTube award, which is called the BookTube Prize, and it's being run by Robert at Barter Hordes, and I'll link to his video down below. And I'm thinking I might want to take part in that in some way. I'll probably be doing a video on that. I've read a surprising amount of books from the long list that they comprised. I thought I wouldn't have read as many as I actually did read, so huzzah. And I might be reading some more, because this is a literary fiction prize, and I have a soft spot for that, and there's certainly some titles on there that have caught my fancy even before I saw these videos. This means, I guess, that I'm following 3 book awards that have been made by booktubers. We have the BookTube Prize, which seems a fair bit like standard literary prizes, where a list of judges who aren't me choose the long lists and the short lists and then read the books and decide on the winners. Then a couple months ago there was David at the Poptimist, who did the booktuber book tag. Oh, there was a lot of book in it, and it was sort of vaguely based on the Man Booker, but it was much more like the Goodreads Choice Awards, in that the entire list was made by popular vote. Anybody who submitted to his form got their votes in and got to basically choose the winners that way. And the categories were in literary fiction, in various literary fiction genres, but also in nonfiction, and there was also an emphasis on short stories, which the BookTube Prize doesn't have, and I like that. And the final BookTube award that I'm invested in is a little bit older. It's the BookTube SFF Awards, and it's, I think, a hybrid and sort of based on the Hugos, in that we as participants get to choose the long list by voting for our favorites in science fiction and fantasy in Hugo-style categories. But then the judges from the BookTube SFF community will pick the winners from that. And they'll be doing read-alongs throughout much of the year. Much like the BookTube Prize, we'll be doing read-alongs. The judges will read, and then sometime later in the year decide on the winners. And I believe the BookTube SFF Awards will be starting up at the end of the month. I've been waiting for the videos. I already know who I'm going to pick for Best Adult Science Fiction, and Best Fantasy, and Best YA Fantasy, and maybe even Best Debut Novel this year, so I'll be making a video for that as well, probably in February. So yeah, that about covers it for me now. I don't have much more to say. This morning I went to Shabbat services at my synagogue. It was a very special Shabbat because it was Shabbat Shira, where in the Torah we read about the Israelites crossing the Red Sea and singing a song for freedom, and so there's a special song within the Torah reading, and I was part of the flash choir, so we sang special liturgical music as well. And it was also MLK weekend, and we had a local gospel choir sing for us as well, several songs, and they were just amazing. And there just seemed to be so much going on in the community, so many sort of rabbinical blessings going out to people, like on doing major life events, that the service was much longer than usual. And then we had a guest speaker, an African-American rabbi, who spoke to us about Jewish inclusivity in the sermon, and then at an afternoon talk afterwards. And so it was a really full and special day. So I'm hoping to use all of this great positivity to feel less like an imposter like on BookTube or anywhere else, and to embrace my reading and my writing and community wherever I can find it. So thanks so much for sticking with me, everybody, and I will see you next time.